morning, everybody. Welcome to the 33rd meeting of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources. I'd like to welcome our members and our guests, particularly those who are on the West Coast and who are up bright and early to attend this meeting. We're all very grateful. We have another great panel this morning and continuing our study. So I believe all our panel members are familiar with the process, but I'll just go through it quickly. We're doing this by Zoom, so we have to be a little bit patient and not talk over each other. Speaking a little bit slowly is not a bad thing. It helps our translators. You have translation services available to you on your screen, and you are welcome to and encouraged to speak either of our official languages. You will be asked questions in both, I'm sure. But thank you for coming. Each presenter will be given up to 6 minutes to make their opening remarks, up to 5 minutes to make their opening remarks. And then once all of them are complete, will be followed by questions from the members. So we have 4 witnesses today. We have Air Products, Inc., Dr. Jacques Roy, Ballard Power, and Hyundai Auto Canada. So thank you all for joining us. I will go through the opening remarks in that order. So why don't we start with Mr. Simon Moore, who's the Vice President, Investor Relations, Government Relations, and Sustainability from Air Products, Inc. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee. On behalf of the employees of Air Products globally and in Canada, thank you for the invitation to appear before your committee today. Air Products is a global corporation operating in over 50 countries with a market cap of over $65 billion. Our 19,000 employees work hard every day supplying critical products to customers in a variety of industries. Our products enable our customers to be more productive and more efficient. For example, last year our products allowed our customers to avoid the equivalent of 72 million metric tons of equivalent carbon dioxide emissions. At Air Products, our higher purpose is to bring people together to collaborate and innovate solutions to the world's most significant energy and environmental sustainability challenges. Obviously, we consider the energy transition one of the greatest challenges of our time. We are the leading global supplier of hydrogen. Every day, we produce and safely transport over 9,000 tons per day of hydrogen via pipeline and trucks. We are a pioneer in the hydrogen for mobility market. We've been involved in over 250 projects over the last 15 years and participate in over 1.5 million hydrogen fills every year. We have a strong presence in Canada as the leading supplier of hydrogen. Our Alberta Heartland Hydrogen System began operations in 2006. Today, we have 3 world-scale plants connected by an over 50-kilometer pipeline network supplying the refining and petrochemical sectors. We also have a hydrogen system, including liquefaction in Sarnia. Our sustainability-driven offerings for gasification, carbon capture, and hydrogen are essential and necessary components of any realistic energy transition plan to reduce carbon intensity while also meeting the world's growing energy demand. A prime example of translating our vision into reality is our announcement just last week of a world-scale energy complex in Edmonton, which will begin with a transformative $1.3 billion net zero hydrogen production and liquefaction facility to be on stream in 2024. This project is an example of what we can achieve when all 3 levels of government work to create a common solution, bring investment, and in this case, over 2,500 good-paying construction jobs when they are desperately needed. This first-of-its-kind investment enables the production of net zero hydrogen from natural gas and was made possible by Canada's clean energy diversification strategy and regulatory framework that made it clear that clean hydrogen will be a key enabler to Canada being carbon neutral by 2050. During the announcement ceremony last week, which included Ministers O'Regan and Champagne, our chairman, Seifi Ghasemi, stated, "I can't think of a better place to invest our money for the long term than Canada. You are leading the world in the vision for energy transition." While we are clearly supportive of the federal government's leadership, I'd like to suggest a few overarching considerations. First, with regard to hydrogen, consider focusing on carbon intensity, not color. Much of the world still assumes that green hydrogen made from renewables is better than blue hydrogen derived from fossil fuels, mainly natural gas. We believe the net zero complex we announced last week proves that blue hydrogen can be produced with a carbon intensity equal to green. Where that's the case, the policy should be agnostic to how the hydrogen is derived and focus on its carbon intensity. This will allow the market to determine the best option. Second, in tax policy, focus on CO2 reduction efficiency, not capital investment. Finance Canada is currently conducting a consultation on tax policy to incent carbon capture and storage. We had hoped Canada would follow the US lead with a tax incentive similar to the US 45Q tax reduction tied to the volume of CO2 sequestered. Finance Canada's proposed capital investment tax credit approach runs the risk of prioritizing capital investment inefficiency over CO2 reduction efficiency. We hope this approach gets reconsidered. And finally, address the historical bias against multi-facility solutions. For over 70 years, Air Products has been the pioneer in the outsourced model of industrial gases and energy supply. For the refining sector, our outsourced model is recognized as a global best practice for the safe, reliable, and capital-efficient supply of critical gases like hydrogen. Unfortunately, federal tax and environmental policies have in the past created an unintentional bias against our multi-facility offerings. This bias has even made its way in the proposed Clean Fuel Standard, which we are working hard to address with officials at Environment and Climate Change Canada. Given that every ton of CO2 reduction matters, we urge you to avoid the flaw every can. Thank you again for the opportunity to come before the committee today, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Okay, next up we have Dr. Jacques Roy. You're on mute, Doctor.
Sorry about that.
That happens at least once a meeting. Don't
the quote of the year. Okay, merci.
Thank you for inviting me, dear members of the committee. I am pleased to be here with you today to share the results of my research on the potential of hydrogen. I am a professor of transportation and logistics management. I'm not a hydrogen specialist, but what interests me is the applications of hydrogen to the various modes of transportation. And in fact, my interest in hydrogen is quite recent. It dates back to 2019, when I conducted a study on the use of hydrogen all over the world. I did that for the Hydrogène Québec Coalition, which includes automobile manufacturers like Hyundai and Toyota, gas producers like Air Liquide, Messer, and distributors. This study was essentially based on a fairly exhaustive review of the literature and on interviews with experts in the field. So here are some of the highlights of the study, which will be available for you very soon. So first of all, as we all know, globally, the use of zero-emission electric vehicles is more and more common and being promoted. The more common ones are battery-powered electric vehicles, which are more and more available on the market, and there are vehicles that run on hydrogen fuel cells. Battery-powered vehicles are more appropriate for small vehicles over short distances, but heavy vehicles like Class 8 trucks, and even less heavy vehicles, but vehicles that have to be used over long distances and have to run for many hours a day, well, there, hydrogen is better suited. And between the two, of course, there's all of the hybrid vehicles that can be plugged in or not. So hydrogen-powered vehicles are growing in popularity around the world. In our study, we had estimated the number of hydrogen-powered vehicles at 13,000 at the end of 2018, but then a year later there were over 25,000, so almost twice the initial amount. And they're found mostly in the United States, California, Asia, Japan, China, and South Korea, and in Europe, in Germany, France, Norway, the UK, etc. As the number of vehicles rose, well, the number of charging stations also increased from 376 at the end of 2018 to 470 a year later. And the growth took place particularly in Asia and in Germany. Speaking of vehicles, hydrogen fuel buses are being marketed more and more. hydrogen fuel cell buses are not as marketed in Canada, but the demand is quite high. Over 4,000 orders were made in China for hydrogen fuel cell buses and also in South Korea. But in Canada, we have manufacturers like Ballard and vehicle manufacturers and others like Cummins. So we have manufacturing businesses that are very active in that sector. With regard to the transport of goods, I think that hydrogen is particularly suitable for heavy trucks, which are, as you know, the main source of pollution in transport. So heavy trucks over long distance with intense use. Well, in Canada, there is winter, so battery-powered vehicles are less efficient in those climatic conditions. There are a number of manufacturers of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles like Nikola, Hyundai, Cummins, Toyota. And what's interesting, because we were just talking about Alberta and producing hydrogen from natural gas, but there is a test being run in Alberta which is called Azatec. It's being conducted with Transport Trimac and Bison. And what they're doing is they're basically testing hydrogen-powered vehicles transporting goods between Calgary and Edmonton. And I think that that test should be followed very, very carefully and should even be replicated in Quebec and in Ontario in the Montreal-Toronto corridor, for example. So these are marketed in the United States through Anheuser-Busch, France through Carrefour, and China, and the Netherlands, lots of different places. So when you talk about the advantages of fuel cells versus batteries, well, there's recharging time. The weight of batteries is also a significant point to consider when it comes to battery-powered vehicles, because transporters want to be transporting goods, not batteries. There's also the range of operation without loss due to cold when you're talking about fuel cells. So if you're going from Abitibi to Montreal, for example, you want to be sure that you don't lose power because of cold. But the con here is that the costs are high in the short term. But according to all of the studies that I've done, but we do expect the cost to start dropping. There are also trains that can use hydrogen. There are passenger trains. There are a number of projects in Germany and France as well. Hydrogen can also be used for a number of other applications like forklifts and distribution centers, industrial applications, aircraft. Airbus is thinking of using hydrogen for its future airships. So I'd like to summarize with a few recommendations. So I think that governments should I think that it's important to encourage initiatives and develop a hydrogen roadmap, because wherever hydrogen is being developed, the government is very involved. So you have to create ways of encouraging. I'm thinking about the high-frequency train via rail, the high-frequency transportation between Quebec and other places. I know I'm running out of time, so I will be able to answer questions on any other applications. I'm so sorry. So there we go. I'll leave you with that.
Doctor. Okay, over to Mr. Picard from Ballard Power for 5 minutes, please.
Hello, bonjour, good morning all, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a witness on your panel today. I'm very happy to be representing Ballard Power Systems. Ballard is a Canadian company based in British Columbia. We today employ over 950 people globally, with more than 760 in Canada. We have been developing fuel cell technology for the past 40 years, and we put on the road the first ever fuel cell buses in Vancouver in the late 90s. Today, we export almost 100% of our production, and last year we produced over 100 megawatt of fuel cell products. The hydrogen strategy, which was published in 2020 by NRCan, highlighted the critical role of hydrogen in the decarbonization of the Canadian economy in order to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, especially for the hard-to-abate sectors like heavy-duty transportation, and has been highlighted by the previous speakers. Fuel cell electric buses, trucks, trains, and ships benefit from the high energy density of hydrogen as a fuel to match the performance of diesel vehicle with zero emission and without any compromise in operation, enabling long range and operation in harsh climate like we have in Canada. The use of green hydrogen produced from renewable energy as and it recently announced some projects in Quebec, will reduce the GHG emission by 89% for heavy-duty truck compared to the diesel equivalent. But such reduction can also be achieved by using blue hydrogen produced from natural gas with carbon capture and sequestration. As an example, a transit bus using such low-carbon blue hydrogen in Alberta will reduce its GHG emission by 83% compared to a diesel bus. To compare, a battery electric bus will only reduce emission by 50% in Alberta due to the higher carbon intensity of the electric grid. The use of hydrogen as a low carbon fuel is also an economic opportunity for Canada. With a unique and strong and world-leading hydrogen and fuel cell industry, Canada is very well positioned to benefit from this transition. At Ballard alone, we have created over 200 high-paying jobs in the past 2 years only. According to the NRCan study, hydrogen published in the hydrogen strategy document, up to 350,000 jobs can be created in Canada with the growth of the hydrogen economy in the next 3 decades. So we believe now is a time to act, is a time to start. Supporting the production of hydrogen as a low carbon fuel in Canada, regulation such as the clean fuel standards, and providing financial incentive for vehicle operators will accelerate the adoption of zero emission fuel cell vehicle such as transit bus, trucks, as we are demonstrating now in Alberta in the 60-ton fuel cell truck demonstration as the Aztec project, or wind train, as recently announced with CP Rail doing the first freight locomotive using hydrogen as a fuel. All those vehicles disproportionately contribute to the most GHG emission compared to other transportation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, on next we have from Hyundai Auto Canada Corp, President CEO, Mr. Don Romano.
Well, thank you very much. Bonjour. Merci. I'd like to start by saying that the auto industry is past the inflection point of change when it comes to electrification, having invested to date over $300 billion in zero emission vehicle development production, which is already resulting in a substantial supply with much more to come. I mean, you could confidently say that our industry is at the point of no return when it comes down to zero emission vehicles in the future. And within our industry, I'm proud that Hyundai is an industry leader. We presently are the second largest retailer of zero emission vehicles next to Tesla, and one of the only brands to offer hydrogen fuel cell cars in Canada. Now, while we offer hybrids and plug-in hybrids, our primary focus is a zero emissions future with pure EV and fuel cell vehicles. We believe in fuel cell vehicles for a number of reasons, which have already been discussed. In addition to being zero emissions, they're more consumer friendly. I think as Mr. Roy had mentioned, that the vehicles charge rapidly in 5 minutes, and they have a substantially longer range than traditional all-electric vehicles, addressing the 2 biggest consumer issues that we face, the 2 biggest pain points, and that is the charge time and the range. In addition, fuel cell vehicles require substantially less batteries. But really, regardless of whether a consumer chooses an electric vehicle or a fuel cell vehicle, as long as it's zero emissions, the real challenge that we face is the infrastructure for charging. Both electric charging stations and hydrogen fuel cell pumps in our country are too few in number to accommodate the current and forthcoming supply of zero emission vehicles. And to change this situation, we need commitments from gas stations, from retail outlets, home builders, parking operators to install the charging systems that will give all Canadians a peace of mind that zero emission vehicles will accommodate all of their transportation needs. In other words, it's going to take a village for our country to make zero emissions part of our future and to turn that into a reality. But I believe if we all pull together, and when I say all, I mean everybody. It cannot be just the people that are speaking today. It cannot be just the auto manufacturers, but everybody's going to have to carry their weight and get involved in this movement. But if they do, I believe that a zero emissions future is not just possible, it's inevitable. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move into the first rounds of questions for 6 minutes each, starting with Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for coming out today. I'm most interested with starting with our friends from Air Products Association. I'm very excited to see your $1.3 billion announcement in the Alberta Industrial Heartland, which is partially in my riding in Sturgeon River Parkland. I wanted to ask, why did your company believe that the Alberta Industrial Heartland was the best place to make this investment? What were the factors that played into that decision?
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the recognition of the very exciting announcement. So a number of factors. To be frank, we've had a very successful hydrogen production and pipeline network operation in the area for more than 15 years. So we have experience in executing projects there. We've had the support of various government authorities, very qualified workforce in the area. So quite frankly, we know it's a good place to do business. That's one thing. The second thing is, quite frankly, the ability to effectively capture and sequester the CO2. Taking advantage of the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line, the CO2 pipeline, obviously is very beneficial to make this project where you can take natural gas and capture over 95% of the CO2 to be sequestered and then generate hydrogen-based electric power to offset the rest. And of course, this project, in addition to making zero carbon hydrogen for our pipeline network, is also going to feed hydrogen into a liquid hydrogen plant, which will make liquid hydrogen for the mobility market. And then finally, I must say that we were very, very excited to see the significant support from various levels of the Canadian government, including a number of officials who joined us on our announcement call last week. So that's a combination of factors that helped make this the right decision for us.
So drilling down into that, one thing in this part of the country, I mean, we do have some renewable power, windmills, solar panels, but Alberta is very well known for its its natural gas resources and those energy sources. We've been debating and talking from witnesses about the merits of blue hydrogen, gray hydrogen versus green hydrogen. Did the blue hydrogen, I presume you're using blue hydrogen, did the blue hydrogen play a role in your investment decision?
Yes, and as I said in my remarks, I think we all are familiar with the colors, but I think honestly, occasionally assigning these products colors can confuse things. If I could just expand on that for a second. Obviously, everybody's familiar that blue hydrogen is produced from hydrocarbons, but what matters is its carbon intensity. In a different type of process, you might only be able to capture half of the CO2 from a hydrogen plant. We chose a different process here that helps us capture more than 95% of the CO2. So quite frankly, the carbon footprint of the hydrogen from this project is very similar to a so-called green hydrogen project produced from renewable energy. So again, I think it's important to keep focused on the actual carbon intensity as opposed to necessarily what color it is assigned to be. If I could, we've absolutely looked at different opportunities. Not to get off track, but we're building a $7 billion renewable carbon-free green hydrogen facility in Saudi Arabia for export around the world. And I share that with you to provide some credence behind the idea that we have the capability to do both hydrocarbon-based zero carbon hydrogen and renewable energy-driven carbon-free hydrogen. And we saw, again, with the opportunity to deploy this technology, leverage the CO2 pipeline, this looked like the right solution for here to create net zero hydrogen.
Thank you. And something that you remarked really interests me. You were talking about the Q45 tax, and that's something I brought up on numerous times in this committee. Can you describe to us how the United States Q45 tax credit, the differences that concern you between that and what has been proposed in the recent budget, and what you would propose that would be more helpful for your industry?
Yeah, and I realize this is an oversimplification, but at the end of the day, we want this policy to reduce CO2. And if the policy is set up to be a credit for investment, that is indirect. If the policy is set up to create value for actual volume of CO2 sequestered, that seems to be a lot more direct. A concern would be is a policy that creates, again, tied to the amount of capital spent might result in inefficient use of capital. And what would be a more direct approach would be to directly incent putting the CO2 in the ground, which is what this is focused on.
Thank you. My next question, for our friends from Ballard Power, I seem to be getting a theme here. This trucking job that's coming out of Alberta. I was wondering if you could talk about, how many years are we looking out to seeing, a significant market share for hydrogen fuel cells in large trucks in Canada? How many years do you think we're away from that?
It's a really good question. I wish I have an answer for you. I think it's going to depend on both things. The ability of the industry, like Ballard and a fuel cell side on the engine side, to drive the cost. And I think for that, we are on good track. I think we have been reducing a lot of the cost of the technology in the past 5 years and accelerating now. We are in a really aggressive cost reduction. So we should be able, by the end of the decade, globally, when you look at the volume, to be actually at parity with a diesel truck. So on the fuel cell side, I think making really great progress. I think the challenge will be the deployment of the hydrogen infrastructure. If we really want to, to be able to have a significant market share of trucks operating with hydrogen, we need to build that heavy-duty station infrastructure across Canada. So initially, we can start with trucks operating as a fleet base, home return, or operating between 2 points. So to minimize the requirement in terms of hydrogen infrastructure by focusing on those fleet of vehicles. And that, we believe probably by the second part of this decade, we can start to see a significant part of those vehicles being fueled by hydrogen.
Thank you. One more quick question.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Mr. Weiler, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also like to thank the witnesses for joining for a very interesting meeting today. My first question is for Air Products. Mr. Moore, you mentioned a few things that I thought were quite interesting. You mentioned not only, of course, the important announcement last week in Canada, but also the announcement that you're pursuing, a hydrogen production facility focused on green hydrogen. And I know there's not to get too much into the debate over colors, but there is, I find sometimes a disagreement on whether it makes sense to produce blue hydrogen when over time there is estimates that green hydrogen is going to be cheaper to produce. And so I'm curious to hear from your perspective, what made you decide to pursue blue hydrogen in Alberta, but then focus on producing green hydrogen in Saudi Arabia, just in terms of the cost profile for producing it?
Well, thank you very much. And I think in general, we see the transition, this energy transition, driven very much by hydrogen. It's going to have to be an and solution, not an or solution. And there are going to be sets of circumstances in different places in the world that create the right incentive to do a renewable energy driven electrolysis project. And then there's going to be other parts of the world where it makes sense to do a hydrocarbon based. And the technology magic is to have a hydrocarbon based hydrogen solution that has the lowest hydrogen CO2 footprint. So I think there's a different set of circumstances in different cases. We want to be a provider of all of these types of solutions to our customers and or countries around the world that are looking for it. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's some very strong and strategic reasons why we think this project makes sense that we announced last week. I would also add that we hope this is not our last investment in this space in Canada, and we are open to additional hydrocarbon-based investments as well as renewable energy-based hydrogen investment.
Thank you. And maybe just to follow up on that, I'm just curious if you could explain a little bit how you see the announcement from last week fitting into the federal government's wider hydrogen strategy, and what you see as potential next steps, both in terms of your own company's projects, but also what you're hearing from some of your competitors in this market in terms of what that might mean in terms of creating a hub.
Great. And again, our project not only provides pipeline hydrogen and net zero, but creates 30 tons a day of liquid hydrogen net zero that can be used for the transportation market. So I think one of the reasons why we have the witnesses we have here today is because they kind of all represent one of the key pieces of making this happen. We can't do it alone. The auto companies can't do it alone. The fuel cell companies can't do it alone. So one of the things that we're proud of now is we can say without a doubt, in 2024, there'll be 30 tons a day of net zero liquid hydrogen available from this project. And again, we hope this is just a start. And that's one of the key elements. And from that, then, as was mentioned a few times, the actual fueling infrastructure needs to be created. I very much agree with the earlier witness who talked about heavy trucks and buses being the right market for hydrogen in the short term. But one of the things is we've got to, each of us in our own way has to take bold steps. We have to move this forward, and we have to move this forward in a way that ends up with the right vehicles, the right incentives, and quite frankly, the right hydrogen when it's needed.
Thank you, and that's actually a great segue to my next questions for Ballard Power. Likewise, I also hail from British Columbia, and we do have some hydrogen fueling stations here, and one not too far away from where I live. And I'm always quite impressed with the breadth of markets that Ballard's selling into and the range of products that your fuel cells are being used, whether that's buses, trains, trucks, ships, cars, forklifts, and more. And I was hoping you could maybe just discuss where you see the greatest opportunity for your products globally, and what are the factors leading to that interest that we may be able to seek to emulate in Canada to create that market here?
Thank you for your question. I believe, as I mentioned earlier, that heavy-duty mobility is really where hydrogen provide one of the most attractive value proposition. I think the high energy density of hydrogen enable a lot of energy to be packed on those vehicles. So if you have a vehicle which operates on long hours, like a transit bus, which is on the road from 5 a.m. to sometime 11 p.m., or a truck, which covers very long distance, the same thing on a train, I think those vehicles need a lot of energy. And hydrogen provides that energy storage and delivers the vehicle operators with a range that they need, as well as it was highlighted earlier, the quick refueling enables those vehicles to be, those vehicles are more expensive than a regular vehicle. So you want to utilize those vehicles as much as possible. You want to operate them in multiple shifts. So hydrogen allows you to do that. So this is really where we are focusing today in that heavy duty mobility segment. And those vehicles also produce more emission proportionally than a car, which might be used only 1 hour per day. So I think if you want to have the biggest impact on the vehicle operation to enable that transition to zero emission, as well as the GHG emission, this is where the sweet spot is. And that's what is recognized if you look at every hydrogen strategy published by more than 30 countries in the past 18 months. They all highlight that, for transportation, there are other sectors, but for transportation, heavy duty mobility is one of the sweet spots.
Thanks, Mr. Weiler. Okay, moving on to Mr. Simard.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, James. I have a question for Mr. Moore, but first I want to make sure that he can hear me and that the interpretation is working. You hear me? Yes? Good. So I wonder, Mr. Moore, because I wanted to understand the issue of hydrogen, and I asked Mr. Karim Zaghib, who is a PhD in electrochemistry and works for Investissement Québec right now, and I asked him, and he said that the production of 1 ton of blue hydrogen or gray hydrogen can generate between 10 and 11 tons of CO2. So when you tell us that we shouldn't really worry about colors, I do think there is a fairly high importance when it comes to that. So I was wondering whether you have figures on the carbon intensity of a ton of blue hydrogen, and if you could give those figures to the committee.
Understand the question, but please ask again. So when we speak of hydrogen produced from natural gas, the typical process today around the world is a steam methane reformer. And if there is no carbon capture on that system, it's going to produce, I might have said 9 tons of CO2 per ton of hydrogen, but essentially the same number, 8 or 9 tons. So a significant amount of CO2. Now, when we turn to blue hydrogen has to still be produced. The CO2 is still produced by chemistry. The question is, how much of it can you capture? So if you take a conventional hydrogen plant and retrofit a carbon capture system, at best, you can get approximately 50% of the CO2. So perhaps then you'd have 5 tons of CO2 per ton of hydrogen. We've chosen a new technology for this project called an autothermal reformer, which allows us to capture greater than 95% of the CO2 produced in this process. In addition, we create no carbon electricity, which offsets the rest. So in this project, producing hydrogen from natural gas, we view this as net zero. In other words, on a net basis, no CO2 emissions for the production of the hydrogen. I hope that answers the question.
Oui.
Yes, you answered my question. I would like to know for the whole process, I am very new to this, but the whole process for carbon capture, doesn't that mean that your production cost is about the same or as high as the production of green hydrogen? Because it's said to be more expensive to produce green hydrogen.
Correct. But our view is these are different products. They have a different place in the marketplace. Comparing hydrogen produced from natural gas, where there's no penalty for the CO2 emissions and there's no CO2 capture, comparing that to the cost of producing net zero hydrogen from this facility, we view those, quite frankly, as apples and oranges. And the reason that we're here today, the reason that the world is so focused on this is to reduce the CO2 footprint. So yes, we do believe that the products from this facility will be more expensive than if they were made from a facility that had no carbon capture, emitted all the CO2, and there was no penalty for doing so. But that's not, as you very well know, as the committee knows, that's not where the world is going. The world needs its energy produced with a lower carbon intensity. And that's what's exciting about this project, is being able to prove that we can do this and produce that net zero hydrogen.
Oui, ma préoccupation.
Yes, my concern, I think, Mr. Moore, and please don't take this personally, but I think that in its hydrogen strategy, what the government is doing, the federal government is doing, is it's trying to decarbonize the fossil fuel industry by finding it something to work on, which is hydrogen. But I don't have a lot of information on the carbon capture sector. If it's more expensive to do that, well, I wonder why any business would do that. I guess they would do this because there's an awful lot of government support coming down the pipeline. Do you agree?
Sure that my comments did not come across incorrectly. I think that when we compare to so-called gray hydrogen, any of the solutions, blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, are likely to be more expensive. That's the reason why nobody produces hydrogen over the last 10 years, a la blue or green, effectively. I do think that, again, as I mentioned earlier, in different parts of the world, hydrocarbon-based net zero hydrogen or renewable energy-based net zero hydrogen, there'll be places in the world for each of those to fit. So I would suggest that the world, from our view, let me say it that way, is very, very focused on reducing the carbon intensity of its energy. And one of the great ways to do that, as we've heard today, is hydrogen. as long as you can reduce the CO2 footprint. And there's really a couple of different options here. And as I mentioned, we're doing projects in both areas. So we view this project opportunity as creating the framework where the world can have these carbon-free hydrogen molecules that it wants for the energy transition.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Okay, next, Mr. Cannings.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. And I'm going to pick up on something. We'll start with Mr. Romano with Hyundai. You mentioned the challenge for hydrogen and fuel cells is the charging infrastructure. It's like the pain point you mentioned for electric vehicles, having a charging station. Challenge for hydrogen is having that recharging. If we're going to look to a future, and hopefully it's sometime in the near future, where we can have semi-trailers traveling across Canada, where we can have trains using hydrogen, fuel cells, cars, we need that infrastructure and we've heard this from other witnesses, in hubs across the country. And we've heard from other witnesses that this is where the government could really play a role, just as it has started to play a role in expanding the EV charging infrastructure, in building those hubs, in building that infrastructure to move hydrogen to those hubs where they can be used by the trucks, trains, whoever's using them. And I'm just wondering if you would like to comment on that, what role the government could play in building that infrastructure so as part of this team that we need.
Well, I think, first of all, when it came down to electrification, the government was instrumental in working with the auto manufacturers to build the infrastructure and to bring EVs forward. I can tell you right now, we have more EVs than demand. Supply is outstripping demand right now. That's a problem. That's a big problem, and we're equally concerned with fuel cells. We're on our second version of fuel cells, the Nexo, which is available to you right now. But unfortunately, when you look at the infrastructure for charging outside of Vancouver, there's 1 or 2 stations. There's 12,000 gas stations out there. So we have a lot of work to do. But the first place I would focus on is with heavy duty trucks. And I think all my colleagues have said the exact same thing. It just makes sense. We produce heavy duty trucks in addition to cars. We sell them into Europe right now. We're actually selling them in California today. Amazon's our first client. I have been personally in contact with Canadian Tire. We can actually envision a time where from Quebec City all the way down to Windsor and into Detroit, we could set up a hydrogen highway at the en routes all the way through. Simply by putting our fuel stations in those locations, there'll be demand for hydrogen trucks because they just make sense. They make sense from a brand perspective. You can imagine a Canadian Tire able to explain that they are delivering all of their goods and services through hydrogen trucks. We can produce, as well as my competitors can produce, the hydrogen heavy-duty trucks. We simply need that infrastructure, and I think it's just a matter of producing the same requirements for those people that currently provide the gas stations and the retail outlets. When the government came to us and said, we have a mandate for you. You need to produce so many electric vehicles. You need to reduce GHG by a certain level. If we do the same thing for those that currently provide the fossil fuels and ask them to come together as a village and begin to provide that infrastructure, it's just a matter of time. We'll build it and the customers will come and we'll see a much better future.
Thank you. And I'd like to just put that same question to Monsieur Picard from Ballard. What role the federal government can play in building that infrastructure, that hydrogen infrastructure, to help, as Mr. Romano said, we have to do this at the same time, or you'll get problems with supply and demand. Monsieur Picard, if you can just maybe comment on that, what role the federal government can play in helping to build that infrastructure?
I think I will echo the comment by Mr. Romano. I think we need to start looking at those freight corridors, and I think investing in heavy duty hydrogen refueling station in those freight corridors, which are the most important, which also contribute the most to emission. I think it's really where the federal government can help, and building up those hubs. What is important, if you do a hub with the regional hub for the production of low carbon hydrogen, enables to generate demand for the application. And it's not only trucks; it can be buses in a city. It can be also rail at a yard for locomotives. So I think for that perspective, I think the government could invest in the development of those hubs for the production of low carbon hydrogen, as well as the infrastructure around selected freight corridors, which will really help the decarbonization. And ports is also another area where you can put together a lot of application using hydrogen and have a hydrogen refueling, like some of the projects we have been developed now at the Port of Vancouver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much time do we have?
We have about 25 seconds.
Okay, just quickly to Monsieur Pocard again. We've heard about competition with China around critical minerals. Maybe you could spend a few seconds talking about competition with China around hydrogen infrastructure and vehicles and that sort of thing.
Yeah. China is rising as being one of our big competitors. In Canada, I've been leading the fuel cell industry for a long time, but we see a massive investment in technology in China to bring up the knowledge, the know-how, investment in IP development, investment in R&D. And we start to see now Chinese competitors in China mainly, but some of them are starting to come out of China. So a lot of investment is being made in China to complement what they have done in battery, but now in hydrogen and fuel cell technology.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Koenigs. Okay, Mr. Patzer, over to you to start the 5-minute round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go to Mr. Romano here. You mentioned in your opening remarks that your EV vehicles are zero emission. I'm just wondering, when we look at the life cycle footprint of your vehicles, I'm just wondering, where are you sourcing your batteries and where's the mining of these minerals? How is that being done in a zero emission way?
It isn't. And that's a challenge, which is why hydrogen fuel cells make so much more sense. Unfortunately, there are very few battery manufacturers right now, and that footprint will grow over time. We will see more and more batteries being developed here in North America, but until then, you're going to find that the lithium, the cobalt, the zinc, all of the materials that go into those batteries are coming from all over the world, and I would not say that they are coming to us in a ecologically friendly manner. That is an area that has incredible opportunity for improvement. But at the same time, there are limited resources in anything that we produce other than hydrogen. And when you consider hydrogen vehicles and the battery size required, it isn't a whole lot larger than what you're going to find in your car. Because hydrogen is flowing over a membrane and creating electricity while you're on the move, it's constantly charging a battery that's being used to run the engine. And so it makes a lot of sense from a number of aspects. One, obviously, less battery means less mining minerals across different areas where we have less control over the way those products are being mined.
Okay, so are you going to correct your statement from earlier, though, that you said that your EV vehicles are zero emissions, not even net zero emissions, but that they were just zero emissions? So I'm just wondering if you could just make that distinction quickly here.
I would say the production of anything, nothing is zero emissions. There is no such thing as zero emissions in the production of anything. I'm saying those vehicles that are driving right now, my point is there is nothing coming out of that tailpipe. So that was my point in saying that these vehicles are zero emissions. I'm not including the production of that. I'm not including the production of the batteries or the vehicles themselves. I'm just talking about the vehicles themselves on the roads.
Has your company done a life cycle emissions review of the process of what it takes from the beginning of the mining and manufacturing process to the end of life analysis of what's going to happen to these vehicles and these batteries when they're expired?
We were the first company in Canada to make a statement that we have actually contracted with 2 battery recycling companies to handle the end of life of our batteries. One is here in Ontario in Kingston, the other is up in Quebec. And so they are currently, in fact, we're replacing batteries today that we don't feel are operating at optimal levels. Those batteries are now currently going to Canadian factories that are managing the recycling.
Okay, thank you. Next question would be, on average, how much heavier are your EV cars compared to a standard car that you would have bought prior to an EV car?
I couldn't answer that question. I'm sorry. I don't know the actual weight
Okay.
of an EV.
Has your company done any studies on the impacts it's going to have on our highway infrastructure? And the reason why I'm asking, I'm from a rural riding. There's some primary weight highways, but there's a lot of secondary weight highways, and there's also a ton of gravel grid road infrastructure out there that the heavier load is going to have a huge impact overall, especially over time, on our infrastructure. Has your company looked into any of that?
No, I'm sorry, it has not, and I couldn't answer the question on that. That is something I'd be glad to get back to you on, but at this point, the difference in terms of weight between an electric vehicle and a non-electric combustion engine ICE vehicle, I think there are so many different variations there. Most of our electric vehicles are relatively small. Most of our combustion engine vehicles are relatively large. Canadians are buying, for the most part, big trucks as well as big SUVs. When it comes to combustion engines, when they buy electric vehicles, they buy smaller cars, smaller SUVs. So I think if you were to look at it from that perspective, I'd have to do the analysis and get back to you.
Okay. Yeah, I just saw something that the Ford F-150 truck is going to be 1,600 pounds on average heavier than their regular F-150. I think there was a Volvo, I forget the model number, is an X60, I think it is. I might have the wrong model on that, but it was about 1,000 pounds heavier on average. So, just wondering what your thoughts are on the impacts that's going to have.
So we produce a small Kona EV, which is relatively small. We're also coming out with an Ioniq 5. But it's a good question. I apologize for not having the answer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Passer. Okay, on to Mr. Lefebvre for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to go with Dr. Roy. In your opening statement at the end, you talked about solutions very quickly, but could you tell us more about this? How do you see the situation? You heard about what the excellent witnesses said today. This work is very interesting. Could you tell us a little bit more about your solutions and how you see the transition? Yes, just like for the other witnesses, I see that the short-term focus should be on heavy-duty trucks. And that's an area that I'm very focused on. We have to conduct pre-feasibility studies. Of course, we can focus on heavy-duty trucks, but I know this industry. We have to just talk to the key stakeholders to know what their needs are, to see what their hesitation is, and to convince them that hydrogen is a solution. And things won't happen magically. I think we need demonstration projects like the one in Alberta. I talked to the chair of a company in this industry who would consider a freight corridor between Montreal and Toronto for a feasibility project. The government could play an important role, not alone, but with other industry partners to encourage this type of project or pilot or demonstration project. If we don't do that, naturally people hesitate when it comes to hydrogen because it's dangerous or people just don't believe in it. And there is a risk. You have to minimize investment risks.
You talked about hydrogen pipelines. We heard a lot from a lot of witnesses about the being hubs, the importance of having hubs because of the challenges of transporting hydrogen. So can you maybe explain to us your infrastructure that you develop, or the way that you've of what exists in Alberta right now on the hydrogen pipeline side of how you're moving hydrogen around?
Could I just confirm that question was for me?
Yes, Mr. Moore. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, great. Well, every day we move hydrogen via pipeline, we move liquid hydrogen via trucks, and we move gaseous hydrogen via trucks. And so again, this is an example where I don't believe that we see a single answer being the right answer for every situation. So our existing infrastructure today moves very significant quantities of hydrogen from our 3 production plants to our customers in the refining, chemical, and petrochemical industry.
And you said that they were around 50. Sorry, because I have a little time. I just want to understand that infrastructure. You said they were around 50 kilometers in distance. So how long can you go? 500 kilometers? And what are the challenges there? And is there any opportunities there?
Right. So in the U.S. Gulf Coast, we operate a almost 1,000-kilometer hydrogen pipeline. So there's no magic limit to it. It's economically driven. You need to have customers that make sense to run that pipeline. And so there's no practical limitation to it. That's what we do today. And of course, there's the network of customers there to support that length of hydrogen pipeline.
Well, thank you for that. Mr. Romano, I'd like to just discuss with you certainly the cost of a battery vehicle versus a fuel cell vehicle. And we talk about being agnostic, I guess, as we move forward. Certainly we have combustion engines and battery vehicles and fuel cell. We're not agnostic yet, but I'd like to hear from you as a car manufacturer, how you see that, the challenge because of that, and how do you see this in 5 to 10 years if it will become more agnostic?
No, I think your question is exactly right. 5 to 10 years versus today, it has to do with economies of scale. Mm-hmm. So right now, the cost of a fuel cell is far greater than the cost of an EV. Mm-hmm. An EV is greater than a combustion engine, but when you look at the components required to build an EV, long term, it is going to be more cost effective. It's going to be lower priced than a combustion engine. Again, that's item for item, the same content. When you take a look at cars electric vehicles, they have a lot of other features that are being put into them, especially the safety features right now that are coming in, or the ability to create some sound so people know that the car is coming up on them. And we continue to make advancements in that area. Hydrogen vehicles the same way. Right now, hydrogen vehicles are extremely expensive to manufacture because right now we sell 10 hydrogen vehicles a year. We sell 4,000 to 5,000 EVs, and we sell 120,000 gas vehicles. So when you put that together, there's just quite a difference. If we build the infrastructure and put the infrastructure in place to overcome the concerns that consumers have over range and over charging, whether it's fuel cell or electric vehicle, we're going to find that the cost is going to go right back to the same level that we see cars at today. So there'll be no difference over a longer period of time, but we've had a lot of support from the government to provide incentives to get people into zero emission vehicles. And that's what's bridging the gap right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. Okay, over to Mr. Simard for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, j'aurais
Yes, indeed. Sorry, Mr. Moore. I have another question for you. I recently read an article which stipulated that the decarbonization strategy using blue and green hydrogen was to sequester the carbon. But there's no guarantee that technically there won't be any leak of this carbon that is underground. According to you, with today's sequestration technology, is it safe enough today?
Believe that sequestering CO2 is indeed safe when it's done in the right way and in the right geological formations. It's been done for many years in different places. And so, yes, the short answer is we do think it's safe when done the right way.
J'aurais une petite question.
I have a brief question for Mr. Romano, if you can hear me well. I am the owner of a Unique, and recently I noticed that Ioniq 5 will be able to recharge in 15 minutes for 80% of the battery. Earlier you said that one of the challenge is recharging or charging infrastructure. So I think hydrogen might be a solution. But don't you think that within 5 to 6 years, we will be under 15 minutes for the charging of an electric vehicle at 80%?
I believe that is going to happen if we commit ourselves to requiring the fast charging DC infrastructure that's necessary. For instance, today in Ontario, we only have 94 fast chargers versus thousands of gas stations. So if you consider everybody moving in that direction, if every gas station had a fast charger, then yeah, 15 minutes is not a ridiculous time to wait to get an 80% charge. But I would also say that I don't think there's going to be one solution to our zero emissions problems. I think we're going to find that there are going to be multiple solutions, especially when, as my colleagues have talked about, the heavy duty truck industry, the bus industry, even the train industry being able to run more efficiently on hydrogen. And with a hydrogen vehicle, with our Nexo that you can buy today here in Canada, if you have a place to refuel, you can charge that in 5 minutes. It's no different than you're filling up a vehicle with gas. So that provides you the ultimate fast charging. Plus you get over 600 kilometers on that charge. Even though we're getting closer to 500, and I do believe battery technology will improve, my main point is whether it's a battery or a fuel cell, without the infrastructure moving faster, and our industry, again, already investing $300 billion in zero emission vehicles, we've got a problem coming up, and that is we don't have enough demand to meet supply, or not, sorry, enough supply to meet, we have too much supply to meet demand. And
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Mr. Smart. Mr. Cannings, over to you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to turn to Mr. Moore. You talked about a project in Saudi Arabia where you're producing hydrogen, I believe you said, for export. This is something I've heard from other sources. I was at a G20 meeting where the German minister talked about investing in green hydrogen projects in Chile, with massive solar panels. I assume this is what is going on in Saudi Arabia. And then capturing that energy as hydrogen and exporting it around the world. The Japanese minister indicated the same sort of thing. And I've asked this of other witnesses in this study, and I'm just wondering if you could comment on the future of that global market in hydrogen, and how it could play a role over the next 30 years as we go to net zero globally, and what opportunities there are for Canada in this, especially in green hydrogen, perhaps also in blue hydrogen, and I might get to more on that later. But what are the opportunities for Canada to play a role in that global hydrogen export-import market?
Great. Well, yes, exactly right. Just to very briefly describe, this is solar power and a wind farm creating renewable electricity using an electrolyzer to create carbon-free hydrogen. We actually then turn that into ammonia to simplify the transportation around the world, and then dissociate that ammonia back to hydrogen at or near the point of use, and provides carbon-free hydrogen for mobility. The reason the project is in Saudi, and I know this sounds incredibly simple, is because the sun shines a lot and the wind blows a lot in the northeast part of Saudi Arabia. So as you mentioned, places like Chile, what it comes down to, obviously, the cost of renewable energy is a huge part of a carbon-free project that is driven by electrolyzer. You obviously have capital downstream, but the cost of the renewable energy is very, very important. So places in the world where renewable energy is available at a very, very competitive price, I think have the potential to be export locations for hydrogen to places around the world where it's not economical to produce that renewable energy. You mentioned Germany, and some of you may be very familiar throughout Europe, and particularly in Germany, they're embracing the idea that they're going to need to import hydrogen because it's not practical to produce the hydrogen economically within Germany. And so I think, obviously, everybody knows very, very well, Canada is blessed with some very attractive costs of renewable electricity. And I think that absolutely is a potential to be leveraged to produce electrolyzer-driven carbon-free hydrogen, either for use in Canada and or to be exported.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Zimmer, over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, guests. Just one question, Mr. Romano. You talked about incentives, mainly around infrastructure, around renewable energy and having access to that. I guess I have a big question, and I'm sure you understand that it affects a lot of Canadians. It's the term affordability. Mm-hmm. We've heard the term many times before about the taxpayer not wanting to subsidize certain sectors and certain industries. We've certainly heard that around the natural resource side of things. But when do you see renewables becoming self-sufficient, where it doesn't need a big government subsidy either on via insurance or purchasing the vehicle or providing funds for infrastructure? When do you see us getting at the tipping point where the taxpayer isn't paying the bill?
I think it really has to do with the infrastructure. Again, we have more supply than we have demand. I can deliver an electric vehicle today, and with subsidies, I can deliver that in Quebec for under $30,000. So affordability isn't the issue. The concern comes down to the charging infrastructure and the range. We're able to tackle the range with our Kona EV. We now get over 400 kilometers. So range is becoming less of an issue, but the charging is a concern when over 3 million Canadians still live in apartments and they don't have that infrastructure. Once we have that in place and we start getting our volume over the 50% mark, where over half of our vehicles we're producing are electric vehicles, I believe at that point, we're at the inflection point where we have bridged the gap between the cost difference of an electric vehicle versus an ICE vehicle. Yeah. So, and we're probably 5 years away.
Maybe I'll be more specific too about, you talked about the infrastructure, the necessary infrastructure. I'm in British Columbia and I'm in Vancouver lots. I see a lot of charging stations, but I live in Fort St. John, and the charging stations are few and far between. Even thinking about an electric vehicle for me, my destination usually is Prince George or somewhere around between my ridings around 5 hours. And in the winter, it just would be, be impossible to use an EV in my job. But how many, this is a spitballing it, and I don't know if your industry has looked at this. You've talked about 300 billion in the industry around EVs. How much does the industry see as necessary in terms of infrastructure dollars to really set up the necessary infrastructure that you're talking about that's shortfall?
When you talk about the infrastructure, do you mean the infrastructure for building the vehicles or building the charging?
No, the charging infrastructure.
I think if you put the charging infrastructure on top of the cost of the vehicles and require the manufacturers to supply it, I don't know how long it's going to take to make a affordable EV, because right now we make vehicles where we don't have to pay gas stations to produce the gasoline and distribute it. So right. I think there are people that are in better positions to provide the electricity while we provide the cars. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but maybe what I'm getting at is I wasn't asking you as an industry to set up that infrastructure. What is the cost, or has your industry costed the cost to other sectors of what it's required to build that infrastructure? So Esso, as an example, they set up an electric charging station to meet the necessary demand. How much infrastructure is required?
I got it. I would say, what's the cost of not doing it? I don't know what all these 12,000 gas stations are going to do for a living when we are committed to an electric future. Mm-hmm. And it's not just me. I'm the former chairman of the Global Automobile Manufacturers of Canada. This is not just Hyundai. This is the industry is committed and going in this direction. I don't know what they're going to do. What are we going to do with all these people who are employed by the gas stations? And are people going to shop at stores that don't have EV charging available to them? And I think we're going to see a whole dynamic change. I don't know what that cost is going to be. I just know that the cost of not doing it is going to be a lot of empty gas stations on a lot of corners.
How much time do I have, Chair?
50 seconds.
Okay, maybe just one topic that I'll bring up just because it's in my backyard, and it's a way to reduce emissions dramatically. We see this around the world as natural gas. I remember talking to Canadian Gas Association many years ago that talked about setting up filling stations at your home. You could simply just attach it to your natural gas line that comes to your home. How come we don't hear more about natural gas and a better way to reduce emissions in Canada? I'll just throw that out there for anybody.
Anyone?
Si je peux me permettre, au niveau...
Allow me, as far as in the trucking industry, there were some tentatives. Even though there is a reduction of GES, we're not talking about zero emission, so it doesn't fulfill the mission. I have experience in the trucking industry, but we have to talk about the maintenance of the engine. That's another problem. So at the outset, it looks like a very attractive solution, but in reality, it doesn't allow us to reach zero emission, and it creates other problems with the maintenance of these trucks.
Ms. Jones, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our panelists this morning for some wonderful presentations. So a couple of things. One, as you know, the hydrogen strategy for Canada, we've already put it out there. And, you know, the objective is to ensure that there is more development, but also to ensure we have the right regulatory measures and so on. So I appreciate, Mr. Moore, the suggestions that you made when you did your presentation. And I would ask that maybe you could follow those up with some more detail for our committee so that we can look at them as we move into our final report and the recommendations that that we will put forward.
Thank you. We'd be happy to do that.
Okay, great. Thanks. So we talk a lot about the infrastructure and the availability of infrastructure to support hydrogen. You know, is this something that private companies would be taking on and doing more of themselves, or is it profitable for them to be investing right now into the hydrogen industry? I know it's a direction we have to go in. I guess I'm just concerned about what the ability is for some of these companies to be able to do this and to really meet the potential that is out there for this development and the investment that's required. What would be your thoughts on it?
Well,
okay.
I can take a shot at that if you don't mind. I think one of the issues we're doing right now, we're selling, we're giving these trucks, the heavy duty trucks away in Europe just to get them on the road. So to get people familiar with it. So I think the question you're asking is if you build it, will they come? There's going to be a loss for everybody at a certain point, and then there's going to be a break-even point, and then there's going to be an opportunity for everybody to make a profit, a reasonable profit on the systems. But I think everybody should expect the short-term losses are going to be a requirement for the long-term gains. So that's just our perspective at Hyundai.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been hearing is the economic profitability of doing this for some Canadian energy companies. And I guess that's where my question is going here. And I know that maybe Hydrogen Quebec, I know Dr. Roy, in your case, when you were presenting, you alluded to this. And, you know, what is the energy that you guys are, the hydrogen that you guys are producing right now, how much energy is used to produce a ton of hydrogen, for example? And with regard to transportation of the product, you know, how have you developed that network and been able to make it work from an economical perspective for your company?
And I apologize, was that question directed to me?
Roy, Mr. Roy.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't run gas stations, okay, but there is one in Quebec. It's operated by a distributor called RNNR, and if you talk about the cost efficiency, it's very expensive investment, and the only reason they did it is that there were partners who actually invested and helped reduce the cost, not only the cost of the infrastructure, but also the cost of the hydrogen sold at the pump. Also, to be clear, this station actually produces its own hydrogen. So the electrolysis is done on site, which is one way to do it if you have enough volume, enough scale, but it's not the only way actually to operate. Eventually you could have gas distributors who would sort of deliver hydrogen through stations. But at this time, it was felt that producing on site was the better solution. Now, in terms of profitability, we're very far from that. No, it's like an act of faith right now. You have to actually demonstrate the use of hydrogen, and for that you need those refueling stations, like a chicken and egg situation. If you don't have the stations, then people will simply not buy the products. At this time in Quebec, the provincial government has acquired 50 fuel cell cars produced by Toyota, and the experiment, the demonstration is being carried out, trying to understand how the cars are operating, the cost-benefit analysis of using those cars at this time.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ms. Johnson. Okay, next up we have Mr. McLean for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all our witnesses. The main thing I'm hearing that I really enjoy today is the fact that we are talking about decarbonizing, not just shifting one polluting mechanism to another. So I'm going to drill into some of the data that Mr. Romano, you provided here. First of all, let me first ask Mr. Romano, how much net profit has Hyundai made in Canada these past 2 years?
We're not public. We don't disclose our profitability numbers.
Okay. Can you share with the committee?
No,
okay,
I'm not at liberty to share.
Would it be more or less than $25 million per year contributing to Hyundai International?
Yeah, I'm not at liberty to discuss our...
No, the reason I ask, of course, is because you've taken $50 million of subsidy in getting your vehicles on the road from the Canadian government and in what we provide here. So I'm just trying to get this in a relevance perspective as far as what you're contributing to your bottom line and what you're actually being contributed from the Canadian government.
No, I understand. We've had years of losses and years of profit.
Okay, thank you very much. Much appreciated. The issue around CAFE standards, which of course were stalled by many administrations of the United States and Canada follows the US on these CAFE standards. 20 years ago, if we'd stuck to our CAFE standards, would the industry have moved towards more of a hybrid model like Toyota Motors has in Canada, as opposed to this rapid shift such as GM is making right now, and is virtue signaling to go to zero emission vehicles directly, as opposed to steadily reducing the amount of fuel required in the automobile fleet in North America?
I would say that right now the focus, we need to do both. We need to make hybrids, we need to make plug-in hybrids, but that's from a consumer perspective, because some people don't have charging infrastructure. They don't have the ability, if you live in an apartment or a condo, to get the charge.
I hear you.
If we did, go ahead, you please.
The issue I'm saying is, if your own industry had actually abided by CAFE standards, we'd not be in the position we're in right now. Effectively, your industry is becoming much more of a rent seeker from government than it is actually a profitable industry in Canada. And you can challenge that if you want, but I do see a lot of money flowing from the government for your agenda. Let's go into what you've talked about, and you just mentioned there, the whole issue about getting these chargers in all these equations, everywhere they need to be delivered. Who's going to pay for those chargers?
Well, I would hope that the people paying for them are the people that would benefit from them. And that would be the places that currently provide the charging infrastructure for the population today. So I would hope that we would be able to evolve as a community, as a society, where the charging infrastructure would be just as profitable for those people that provide the infrastructure for the charging today, and that the vehicles would also be as profitable.
So I've talked to gas stations that you talk about, and they talk about the issue around getting these chargers put into their stations in, let's talk Red Deer, halfway between Edmonton and Calgary, and it makes zero economic sense. And I know if you build it, they will come scenario, et cetera. However, everybody's looking at it and say the only reason this makes sense is because somebody else is going to pay for it. Now, that being the case, or that being the situation that's been presented, at what point in time do we start recognizing the cost of these is actually being borne by the taxpayer? But also, if I can drill in a little further, every bit of this infrastructure has a CO2 footprint that we're duplicating, and that is additional to the CO2 that the variable part of the equation is actually producing as well. Can you comment on that at all?
No, I'm not sure I understand the point about the CO2. So
the CO2, when you produce this charger, you're always going through production process. You've got copper, you've got aluminum, you've got all kinds of building that happens, construction, you've got cables, everything that has to be built, all of which has a CO2 footprint to get towards the location. The front end CO2 expense, if you will. Any comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's short term. I think long term, the net impact to putting the infrastructure together is going to be lower carbon and eventually no carbon footprint. So I think you're absolutely right. Short term, there's going to be trucks running on gas, delivering the material necessary to put those chargers in place. But over time, those chargers are going to be producing electricity, hopefully from clean energy that is going to produce a better, lower carbon footprint for the country.
Okay, that's one last question of you. How much does your...
only got 10 seconds left.
Okay, how much does your electric vehicle weigh compared to your comparable non-electric vehicle?
And I will get that information. I was asked that question earlier, and I will provide that to you as well. I do not have that at my disposal right now. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, that's my alarm going. Okay, next up we have Mr. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to go back to Mr. Romano for part of my question time. First of all, it's good to see you. As many on this call know, I co-chair the Liberal Auto Caucus, and it's great to see a manufacturer on this study, because I think it's an important perspective that we need to address. And I think you're right. I think we have seen a massive evolution in automaking just in the past 5 years. And I remember being in early days as an elected member of parliament, listening to manufacturers explain to us in the auto caucus, why this isn't going to work and why electric vehicles are not the future. And how quickly that has changed. And a lot of that is market driven, but also a lot of that is the reality of where we have to go to do our part to manage climate change. One of the big issues that we had early on with electric vehicles, and it comes back to infrastructure, was the proprietary nature of charging stations. And I know there's been some work there to help alleviate that. But I pose this question just sort of, in sort of a hypothetical. If you could imagine having a gas engine vehicle and pulling up to a gas station, but realizing you can't pump gas at that gas station because it's a triangular nozzle versus a hexagonal nozzle. Like that's how silly this problem is. Can you maybe speak to that a little bit? Has the industry solve that problem? And when it comes to hydrogen, is that also going to be a problem, or have we learned from that issue?
We have a standard for hydrogen. We do not have a standard for electric vehicles that's been adopted by all manufacturers, but there are adapters that are bridging that problem. I think the bigger issue right now is that the people providing the charging infrastructure all require signups. People have to enroll, which means if you're driving down a highway and you want to use a charge point, you have to be a charge point customer. You can't take a Visa and swipe it and get your charge. And that becomes just one more obstacle to limiting the adoption of EVs. Eventually, what we need is all chargers to operate in a similar fashion to a gas station pump, where any credit that we use, any bank card that we use, would be able to be utilized to charge those cars. That just isn't the case today. And so, right now there are no standards out there for that type of a service. And I think part of the building of the infrastructure will require that those standards are put in place.
Is that something that the industry needs to solve, or do governments need to step in and say, look, we want to support the building of this infrastructure, but there's these barriers here that seem to be an industry issue?
I believe the industry will solve those problems, but I think the government's support in terms of encouraging greater utilization of chargers, fast chargers, DC chargers throughout the country will accelerate the adoption of EVs in general by the population.
Mr. Moore, I saw you nodding your head when I was asking the question. I'm just wondering if you had anything to add to that.
No, I was just happy to hear the acknowledgement that the hydrogen industry has a standard for dispensing fuel into the vehicles, which is obviously very important.
Are there other issues, maybe awareness issues that you guys are focusing on? I was looking at your website earlier, and one of the key messages is a focus on safety. In terms of reaching out to your customers, is that something that we've heard that people are concerned about the safety of hydrogen?
So I would say that we have not heard that people are particularly concerned about the safety of hydrogen. I think everybody should bring respect to any type of energy source, whether that be gasoline, diesel, a battery, or hydrogen. And we're very comfortable that when hydrogen is handled by people who have experience, it follows the safety protocols. It's a very, very safe product. And again, we handle and transport it every day.
So thank you. So back. Nope. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Okay, moving on to Mr. Simard for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, James.
Thank you, Chair. A brief comment to my friend Craig. If he's looking for an activity sector that wastes taxpayers' money, might not be transport electrification, but oil, $24 billion over the past 4 years. And the budget we looked at, $560 million. I don't think the electrification industry is close to those amounts. But I do have a question for Dr. Roy. Earlier, I noted a statistic that Mr. Paccard brought up. With blue hydrogen, there's a gain of emissions of 83% compared to diesel. And if we took the same bus, electric bus, it was only 50% of reductions. That might apply to Alberta, but it doesn't apply to Quebec. And with the electrification of transport, with the ion buses, our emissions are much lower than this calculation if we want to measure it in Alberta. Do you agree that the emissions calculated depend on the sources of energy available and used in Quebec is at another level than the Canadian provinces? There's a difference between emissions that are produced by operating the vehicle, zero emissions because of electric motors. But for the source of energy, of course, hydrogen produced in Quebec with hydroelectricity is green hydrogen, as we're aware of. But for blue hydrogen, what Mr. Moore said is that they're capable of producing a hydrogen that would be 95% CO2 free, closer to 5% of zero emissions. And those two dimensions are what I can comment on. For the production of vehicles, that requires more calculations for battery recycling and that whole cycle.
I'll be there, unfortunately. Mr. Canning's over to you.
Well, thank you. I'd like to go back to Mr. Moore. And earlier, Mr. Simard was talking about, I guess the differences between green and blue hydrogen and whether we want to use those colors or not. But your project in Alberta, I'm not sure if I heard you mention whether that project involves, I know it involves carbon capture and storage, but whether it involves storage that uses enhanced oil recovery, as most carbon capture and storage projects do in North America. And the fact that projects using enhanced oil recovery do, start out as, carbon negative, they're storing carbon, but over a period of years, and it's 6 to 10, I forget the exact number of studies in the States, they turn carbon positive. And I'm just wondering if your industry has factored that in, or whether you're only not using enhanced oil recovery.
Thank you very much. So again, for this net zero project, we expect the CO2 to be sequestered. not used for enhanced oil recovery.
Okay, thank you. That's the main question I had, because I do have concerns, and a lot of people have concerns about carbon capture that does involve enhanced oil recovery. And in fact, that's what we mentioned, the 45Q investments in the United States. Most of them are used for those kind of projects. And that's the concern I had with Mr. McLean's bill on that. Sorry, I've just lost my place in my next question. I think I'll go back to Mr. Romano and just talk about the conservative narrative here seems to be this can't work, this can't happen, this shift to electric or hydrogen vehicles. Just if you can comment on the period of time where there is a carbon footprint of the production of the vehicles, when that shifts to positive, when we are, how long is that period for an electric vehicle until it becomes truly carbon negative?
Let me verify the question. Are you talking about the production of the vehicle itself, or the point at which our fleet will become carbon neutral?
It's just, the narrative we get is that, there's a lot of carbon dioxide emissions in the production of the vehicle, but over time, and I don't want to lead the witness here, but it seems to be a year or two that is overcome and becomes carbon negative, whereas in an ICE engine that just continues to be positive throughout the life of the vehicle.
Time for a very short answer.
Yeah, I can't answer that. We're not into production at Hyundai Canada. We're into distribution, so I really don't know how long it will take. I just know that we are focused on reducing the carbon footprint in the production of the vehicles.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Koenigs. I believe Mr. Patzer is next.
Thank you very much. Mr. Romano, I'm going to go back to you, but before I begin, I just want to just read something here from a study by the UC Davis down in California. They did a study in regards to the impact that the additional weights will have on roads. The damage analysis for an example waste facility access road modeled for only 500 to 2,000 pound increases in the weights of waste hauling trucks from conversion to natural gas indicated that for fully loaded inbound trucks, the 500 pound vehicle weight increase reduced the life of pavement overlays by approximately 5%, and B, that there was an approximately 13% reduction in life with the 2,000 pound vehicle weight increase. So, and I'll end my quote there. The reason why I'm asking this as well too is in Saskatchewan there is a tax now on EV vehicles that people are all up in arms about. Now, the reason why they are doing that is to make up for the loss of fuel tax, which we know that the fuel tax is used for road maintenance and upkeep as well. So as we are shifting to EVs, we know that, again, industry is saying that we're going this way, but we know that there's going to be a disproportionate impact on the infrastructure, but yet we're losing all this tax revenue. So who's going to pay for the road maintenance and infrastructure upkeep if we lose that tax base?
All I can tell you is that I believe that we're at the 8-track tape phase of electrification. We're not even at the cassette, let alone the Sirius XM streaming phase. The batteries are going to get smaller, they're going to get lighter. There are companies out there currently working on solid state batteries, which are significantly smaller and pack a lot more energy. So I can't answer that question directly. I can just tell you that the direction we're headed at this point, as we do with all technology, is to become more efficient, smaller, and lighter. But today, the EVs that we produce are relatively small. So in terms of the example you gave of one of my competitors, I just can't answer the question on that particular vehicle and the weight that it has relative to its combustion engine.
Okay, then with your vehicles, I mean, again, I mentioned earlier, there's the impact that we're going to have on rural infrastructure, but also just for rural Canadians as well. I know we've had a lot of vehicles over the years where, I'll just for one example, power sliding doors in minivans. They do not work on gravel after a period of time. They wear out, they get dust, they just don't work. Has your company done any review or any checking to see what the impacts that, an EV vehicle is going to have, or how the performance is going to be impacted by somebody driving out on country roads, on gravel roads, and even in wintertime when we start, pounding through snowbanks and different things like that?
All I can tell you is that we do substantial studies in all weather conditions on all road types here in Canada. And so we do exhaustive studying, putting them through the rigors of the different, again, climates and road conditions. In terms of the results, we wouldn't put it back into the marketplace if we felt it wasn't going to be able to maintain its lifespan. But there's not much more information I can give you than that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to switch over to the rep from Ballard here. There's a lot of agreement about the importance of free trade for the future of the Canadian auto sector, especially with the old NAFTA agreement. But back when CUSMA was negotiated, there were concerns about the new rules leading to rising auto prices. Would this not create another problem for these new types of vehicles?
Yes, it will. I think at this stage today, when we are trying to reduce the cost of technology and really drive the cost reduction, if you have buyers to trade, especially within North America, and I think the Buy America regulation is a good example, which might force to multiply production sites across the borders, increase the cost, and not going in the right direction, as we need to scale up benefits from a global supply chain in order to reduce the cost of those technologies. Because scaling up and industrialization is how we're going to be able to compete with diesel engines. So those trade barriers are going to go against this cost reduction.
Okay, and I'm just wondering if you want to just add a little bit further to how hydrogen is going to be able to compete with other industries, whether it be, for vehicles, I guess, for example, with whether it be batteries. What's the competition going to be like? Do you kind of have a forecast of which is going to win out, or what the preferred one is going to be?
I think it's based on a use case. I think we're going to need both technology. We're going to need both battery electric and fuel cell electric, depending on the use of the vehicle. And I think at the end of the day, a fuel cell engine is a manufactured part. It's very similar to a diesel engine, but much less complex, much less parts, operating not at high temperature, much less moving parts. So the cost of producing a fuel cell engine at scale, when you reach 10,000 or 50,000 engine per year, will be at parity with the diesel engine. So I think on the cost we get there.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Patzer. Mr. Saray is next, but I see that the bells are ringing in the House. They're 30-minute bells. Unanimous consent, we can continue until 1 o'clock, finish this meeting, which will give us plenty of time to vote. If anybody is not willing to provide their consent, speak up. Okay, we'll carry on. Thank you. Mr. Saray, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. A lot of what you're just saying will be really useful for our study moving forward. But my first questions, I'll go to Mr. Moore and Mr. Rouet. You heard earlier about, Mr. McLean and Mr. Samar, and you look at when we look at this transition and the challenges that the government is facing moving forward, I want to hear your comments on, what the government has done with the clean fuel regulations and the hydrogen strategy, and is there additional recommendations you have for us moving forward on this, on the debate on the transition side?
Well, if I could go, thank you very much. Yes, we are, again, we think that there is a tremendous framework in place. And quite frankly, that's one of the reasons why we were excited to announce our project last week. I did make a couple of suggestions in my remarks about some things maybe to keep focused on as you move forward and create additional opportunities. Again, blue is not better or worse than green. It's about the carbon intensity. The less carbon intensity is better, and I think the program should reflect and focus that. I think we definitely want to recognize, reward CO2 put in the ground, not capital spent to recover CO2. So, programs that support the CO2 recovery, not necessarily spending capital. And then again, we have a nuance around the outsource model where we provide a lot of value to our customers and making sure that that is not negatively impacted by the regulations going forward. So those would be a couple of suggestions that we would make for things to keep in mind.
Monsieur Roy, vous d'autres choses à ajouter?
Oui, je pense que
Mr. Roy? Yes, the government could help because hydrogen they're risky investments for high-frequency trains that with the diesel and for hydrogen trains, the same thing. For Metrolinx, for example, they were backing out of a hydrogen project. Those need support from the government because decision makers won't necessarily take the risk of having the first hydrogen train or tramway in the region. Same thing for buses. There are several electric buses added throughout the country with the help of government, whereas there aren't many hydrogen buses, but there would be niches where it would be more appropriate.
And Mr. Moore, we heard a lot, the biggest challenge when we're looking at hydrogen is the transportation. So you addressed this earlier a bit, but when we look at pipelines and we look at TMX and we look at, there's a project right now in Boucherville in Quebec, what kind of recommendations you have for us when we look at transportation of hydrogen via pipelines with structural and some of the standards around that?
Yeah, great question. And again, I think pipeline and transportation of liquid hydrogen and transportation of gaseous hydrogen via truck will all be part of the answer in different places. So I think what's important is just to make sure that there is a kind of a level and open playing field, and you're not necessarily advantaging a certain type of company or existing companies in certain areas. And then I think the market will determine the best solution for transporting this hydrogen in a given situation.
So when we look at right now, when we look at the hydrogen, we talked a bit about the grade, and we don't want to look at colors, but what you have right now, and you're talking about the carbon intensity and 95%, is that patent? Is that something? Because we heard some challenges on that regard from other witnesses. So is what you're doing something that you feel that the industry will work on what you're doing, because that's really the strategy or the problem we have out west with the oil, the carbon capture, and that element. What recommendations do you have to us and the industry on that?
Well, we're proud of our innovative project, but I can't say it's a unique to Air Products. We look forward to the opportunity, as we shared in our press release and our comments last week. We are very much looking forward to doing additional similar projects in the area. And as you exactly pointed out, again, this goes back to the ability to take hydrocarbon, in this case natural gas, and create zero carbon hydrogen, I think is very, very exciting. And I would just acknowledge, of course, for this to be successful, no single company can do this alone. We will not be able to do all the projects needed. Many others will need to participate as well.
Thank you, Mr. Saray. Okay, so we're moving into next round. It's a 6-minute round. We have about 12 minutes left, so we have time for 2 more questioners. We'll have Mr. McLean, and then we'll finish with Mr. Weiler.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First question, Mr. Moore. Thank you very much, by the way, for all you've added here today. When you talked about the carbon capture utilization needing to look like the 45Q in the States, and the government is going through some consultations on that process right now, can you tell us what your investments in Canada will look like comparatively to the U.S. if we don't have a similar type of tax credit in Canada?
Well, again, I think that there's a lot of different ways to create the value for the sequestered CO2. And again, I think if a program was based on the capital spent, it unfortunately, of course, would incent spending more capital. And if the program is based on CO2 in the ground, then it's going to incent putting CO2 in the ground. So I think that, again, as we said, it works a little bit more efficiently to directly reward the activity that we're looking to do.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to talk about transportation of hydrogen because you're building a plant in Edmonton, or proposed a plant in Edmonton that is going to supply a vast area. Can you tell us about the economics of distribution of produced hydrogen?
Could I just make sure I understand the question? When you say distributed produced hydrogen, I apologize.
Well, you're going to be producing hydrogen in Edmonton and distributing it to obviously a vast distribution area. And where is it better to establish a plant, say in Saskatoon, if you will? What are the economics of build versus local build versus big build?
Yeah, thank you. I apologize. I don't think we would ever suggest that this exciting project we announced last week would support all of Western Canada's transportation needs. I think, again, just some rough numbers, order of magnitude, the liquid hydrogen from this facility could supply about 1,000 city buses or large truck vehicles, depends on their routes and those sorts of things. So clearly there will need to be additional investments that will be made, perhaps in our case, very close to this one, or also on a more distributed basis. So there'll be, in our view, much more to come.
Okay, so $1.3 billion to support 1,000 buses.
I apologize. That's one part of the hydrogen coming out of this facility. A significant part of the hydrogen coming out of this facility is going into the pipeline network to support the refining and chemical and petrochemical market as well. So sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you very much. I'm going to move back to Mr. Romano. Mr. Romano, one of the things about hydrocarbon, consumption in vehicles is there is a big excise tax collection from governments. It's billions of dollars per year distributed between the federal government and municipal governments. When you're comparing apples to apples, how do you think this infrastructure money is going to be replaced when you go down the road and we replace these vehicles with zero emission vehicles?
I don't have the answer to that. I know that the whole transformation to a zero emissions format is going to cause pain in some areas and gain in others, but I don't think there's a free ride to get there. And I do believe that
safe to say that there's a social cost here that the hydrocarbon consumption industry is bearing right now that isn't built into the equation what we're replacing it with. And we're going to have to figure that out.
We have to.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you
going to
very
have
much.
to. Absolutely.
No, I appreciate that very much. And I'll go to a question for Mr. Picard just quickly. I really appreciate that you understood that, the battery buses reduce GHGs at different places depending on the local source of power. So, Mr. Picard, you say 50% in Alberta. Is that life cycle or is that just in the power that's produced in the bus alone?
No, it's just at the tailpipe during the operation of the bus. It doesn't consider the whole life cycle. Maybe to that comment, I like to highlight that a fuel cell has a much, to produce a fuel cell from cradle to gate, so from the components assembly and shipment to the bus OEM, a fuel cell is much less carbon intense. Pretty 70% less than a battery because it's a manufactured product and you use just a material which are assembled and it's not as the same carbon intensity. So some studies are being done showing that if you look at the overall cycle of life of the product, manufacturing a fuel cell engine has probably a similar carbon footprint than manufacturing another internal combustion engine.
Okay, thank you. And hopefully I've got enough time to squeeze one more question here for Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore, you talked about the $7 billion export facility you're building in Saudi Arabia and the benefits there, of course, of the wind and the sun, which we have in abundance in Western Canada as well. But for some reason, can you tell us what it would take to have that kind of export facility of that magnitude built in Canada?
Well, again, what these renewable energy driven facilities come down to, of course, is the cost of renewable energy. And so whether that be wind, solar, hydro, or perhaps in some parts of the world, even nuclear, if there's low cost electricity on a renewable basis available, then that would be a potential candidate for one of these projects. And again, that can supply carbon-free hydrogen into that local market, but also can be used to export as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I'm finished.
Okay, thanks, Mr. McLean. Okay, we will wrap up with Mr. Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to bring it home here. I'd like to pick up on a line of questioning my colleague brought up earlier. And Mr. Moore, you mentioned that you were transporting hydrogen by pipeline a total of 1,000 kilometers in the Gulf Coast. And I'm curious, is this transport being done by purpose-built pipeline infrastructure for hydrogen, or is it going by natural gas pipeline?
No, this is a pipeline network that Air Products built, owns, and operates, and it's only for moving hydrogen.
And have you modeled the capacity of transporting hydrogen with natural gas as some type of a blend or mix, and do you have plans to do that with your new facility that's being built, hopefully in a few years in Alberta?
Well, that's a great question. That feels like that could open up a long conversation. But of course, the opportunity to perhaps blend hydrogen into a natural gas pipeline, and I've seen various studies up to 10, perhaps 20% hydrogen could be blended into the natural gas line and still used as part of a energy source. Now, clearly, that's a partial decarbonization, not a full decarbonization. So we've certainly had some conversations with various entities around the world about that concept. I think that's a possibility going forward, another opportunity for hydrogen. But to answer your specific question, at this current time, we don't have plans to do that with this project we announced last week.
Thank you. Well, the project announced last week was of course able to be concluded or put together with support from several orders of government. At the federal level, we have brought in measures so that the cost of polluting isn't externalized through bringing in a price on pollution, and we're reducing the carbon intensity of fuels through the Clean Fuel Standard. With these two measures steadily increasing in stringency over time, at what point do you see some of the projects like the one that was announced last week being viable without having the additional government support?
Well, I think that's a great question, but to be honest with you, our ability to sit here today and predict exactly how this market is going to shake out over the next 5 to 10 to 20 years, I don't think we're capable of doing that. So I think I would just say, obviously, as everybody has said today, these markets are becoming more and more competitive every day, and coming down the cost curve. But as I also acknowledged, this is fundamentally recognizing the desire of the world to decarbonize its energy source.
Thank you. And maybe I'd like to ask the same question to Mr. Hua as well.
In terms of, can you repeat, please?
When you see with the increasing price on pollution and Clean Fuel Standard, where you're going to have projects like that be cost competitive?
Well, that's a very tough question. We know the cost is reducing, the cost of production, the cost of hydrogen, and so on. Nobody knows exactly when. Consultants claim it will be by 2030, but we'll have to wait and see. If I may add, there was a survey in 1975 claiming that 10% of cars in streets would be fueled by electric vehicles. That was a long time ago, and it was completely wrong. So it's always difficult to make forecasts on energy for the future.
Absolutely. No, and I appreciate that. And, one of the areas we haven't talked so much about right now is on the marine side. I mean, Canada is, of course, a trading nation, and we're in many respects ideally located to ship to Asia and also to ship to Europe through our ports. And I live nearby the busiest port in Canada, one of the busiest in North America. And I was hoping first, Mr. Hua, but then also I'd like to ask Mr. Picard just some of the opportunities you perhaps see in that sector, as well as with drayage and doing freight in and around ports.
Yes, well, the drayage are already projects in Los Angeles where you use both battery electric trucks and hydrogen trucks as experiments. In terms of marine, you have ferries that are run on hydrogen. They are built in Norway, so this I see as a future. And when you talk about export using maritime, I think again Germany is a big market. There was a conference on March 15. And they're begging for hydrogen. They're ready to import hydrogen from Canada. And I think as federal government, you should really look into this as an opportunity for the Canadian economy.
Yes, maybe I like to add, yes, ports represent a really great opportunity to deploy hydrogen because you have the drayage trucks, which was the way. And when you look in, hopefully we're pushing a project in the port of Vancouver, so we should see hopefully some drayage truck in operation shortly. You have yard trucks on the port. A lot of vehicles operate on the ports, and those vehicles similarly operating on hydrogen in Californian ports or in Europe. And the last is the vessel. The marine vessels are a bit more challenging because of the size and their certification. But we have at Ballard today 6 projects of ships which are being built using hydrogen. Smaller ships, we're looking at ferries for passengers or barges for inland navigation. But that's a beginning where we can see the growing role of hydrogen. And actually, we see more and more shipyards, operators, coming to us saying, okay, we need to reduce our emission, how hydrogen can play a role to that, what is the role of a fuel cell. So really big change that we have noticed in that sector in the past, I would say 18 months.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Weiler. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. All good things must come to an end. And this was a very good meeting with excellent witnesses, with great information. So thank you to all of you. We really appreciate it. But we must conclude the meeting now and go do our other duties in the House of Commons. So thank you all, and meeting adjourned. We'll see you Friday.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair.